Thank you for that song, that hymn, 13th century. Right? Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you on this very beautiful day. I'm sure you really would rather be outside, wouldn't you? Enjoying the sun and the green grass in the park, right? So I'll try to make it short and inspirational, I hope, and that you can actually get out there, unless you're involved in the church council meeting afterwards or some other program as we are having today. The title, I'm not sure if it's there, but the title, Building Bridges to the Future, is the title of my sermon this morning. And when Simon suggested that I give the sermon, I was asking him, are you speaking it particularly on a theme right now, or is there something that you are sort of elaborating upon in some area of faith or whatever? And he mentioned that since we're having a big discussion among our leaders right now about how to develop a new structure and a new way of working in the movement here in the UK, that maybe you could at least introduce that. And that I will do, of course. And it's an ongoing project which you'll hear more about over time. But before that, I just wanted to mention in the second song, I think it was, or the second to last song, Never Alone. Is that the name of it? Never once did we ever walk alone. So I was struck by the words in that hymn because it reminded me of a statement by our true Father where he said that I believe in God because he is the only being that I can totally trust without any doubt, that he will never betray me, he will never take advantage of me, and he lives entirely for my benefit. And he said, that's the kind of God that I believe in. And of course, then Father himself has, in his life, as true parents themselves have done, and they all also asking us to do, how can we also become people like that? That we become such people of love and trustworthiness that that is the character eventually that we develop. That is the kind of people we become. And I felt, in the words there that many times in our life we do feel alone. Anybody here not ever feel alone? We've all been through the desert of the soul, so to speak, and you can feel, even it's like as if God himself has not been with you. But I think if we think about how we understand God also, what is the nature, the heart, the character of our parent God, we can be very sure this God that we believe in will never leave us alone. However, he does want us to learn to walk. So there are times when you are, looks like on your own, because you need to strengthen your spiritual legs. You need to grow and develop a sense of who you are yourself. And first of all, this morning I want to share in a sort of a bigger way where our movement has come from, because right now we are in a very important time of transition, especially since our father passed to the spiritual world. There have been a lot of challenges inside and around the movement. And for a lot of people, it's been a time of confusion, a time of questioning, doubting, and reevaluation, and wondering where are we going. I was thinking this morning or yesterday when I was preparing the sermon, what was it like when Jesus Christ walked the earth? Today, Jesus is the founder of the largest religion in the world and in human history. But what did things look like when he himself was alive? What was the flesh and blood Jesus Christ really like when he walked the earth? Recently, as was referred to, I think, by Chris, I participated in this program. What is it called again? The Leadership Conference. Yeah, I was actually attending in the Albert Hall, very convenient from here to walk across the park each morning. And there were something like 5,500 people in that hall, cheering and singing, and we had some really wonderful presentations and talks from various people. And I couldn't help but ask myself, how many of those people, were they alive when Jesus actually was physically on the earth? would have resonated with what he was saying, or would have responded to what he was saying. On which side might they be on? And I was, of course, asking myself the same question. How would I have reacted to the blood and flesh Jesus Christ when he walked the earth? Because 2,000 or so years after the event, it is very easy to, in some ways, fantasize about what he was like, what it was like to be alive with him. But he was a very real person. He was a very challenging person. If you read the Gospel of Matthew chapter 23, you'll understand he was a pretty fiery person as well. And he had a strong sense of indignation about things that were wrong. And did not make life easy sometimes for people who felt that they were closer to God than he was. And so if you were to confront, or if you were to actually directly relate to Jesus Christ, our feelings, our experiences might be quite different than what we may experience today. So this was going through my mind actually during the whole event there. I was very moved particularly by one speaker, in fact two speakers, a husband and wife team, Rick Warren. You've heard of Rick Warren, right? He is the head, I think, of the largest mega church in the United States, or one of the fastest growing churches in America. But what I was moved by was how he and his wife shared with us about their experience of losing their 27-year-old son to suicide. He's so famous, so well known. He was the one that was invited by President Obama to pray at his inauguration, I believe in the first inauguration. And so somebody like that, and also his wife is in her own right a great speaker, a great preacher, and a great humanitarian. But what was really amazing was that to hear them sharing about what they went through when they discovered their son, who had suffered from some mental problems, but finally at the age of 27 took his own life with a gunshot. And especially also she was sharing, or they were sharing, the challenges they faced when they had to deal with the fact that somebody illegally sold him the gun with which he took his life. Because he himself was not allowed to buy a gun. He would not have been permitted. And how to deal with that person, how to forgive, and how to just digest that situation. Also, Mrs. Warren, Rick Warren's wife, shared also in her case about how difficult it was to deal with some staff in a psychiatric institution where somebody had, I think, misdiagnosed or in some other way mishandled his case. And for her, it was the most difficult thing to forgive that person and to deal with that person. But actually, she was able to deal with that and absorb that situation. So these are the two things that stand out for me from that program: the genuineness and the integrity and the heart of the people that were speaking there. And of course, during that time, I was reflecting a lot. Like, why has our movement not come to the level that they are at today in a much shorter time? And how come we as a movement have not been able to make such a foundation on a worldwide level in terms of acceptance by the greater society? So there's a lot of food for thought. I will say that, there's many things, and these should not be seen as excuses, but many things which are quite different in our movement with established Christianity, and many issues which we had to deal with, which they certainly did not have to deal with. And of course, they come on a 2,000-year foundation of, pretty much global acceptance, except in some areas. And so, to really understand what we're dealing with and where we're coming from and where we should go, I want to just sort of go back a little bit in the history of our movement. As you know, if in 1945, Father had been understood by the established churches at that time and accepted and supported, we would be in a completely different situation today. Our movement would not be struggling with the issues we've had to struggle with over the years. And this world, I really believe, would have been transformed. But that did not happen. So in some ways, Father truly looked like a loser as he had to cross that North Korean border, at the border into North Korea, and begin from zero again. But that was the way he had to go. It was similar to Jesus Christ, when he was crucified, hanging on the cross. What chances would people have given his movement of success if they were to look at him dying on the cross? Who would have predicted the impact his life would have made on the world? He would probably have given zero chance of success. Even his own chief disciple had denied knowing him. Another one had sold him to his death, and the others had just simply run away. So he looked like a loser. And in this time, in this moment, when Jesus was at his worst, worst moment, dying physically, being mocked by the thief on the left, he never left his position. He stayed in his position as a son of God. You know, if you're suffering physically, you can become very irritable, right? Or if you're in some way uncomfortable, you can easily become irritable and say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. Jesus was bleeding to death on the cross. He was being mocked by a thief on the left side, and he could easily have snapped and just condemned this person, but he kept his position. He understood, I am God's son. And then, of course, the thief on the right side had a different attitude and acknowledged they deserved what they got, but Jesus was not guilty of any crime. And of course, he was the only one to whom Jesus promised paradise. He never promised even his own disciples they would ever be with him in paradise. Only the thief on the right side. So think about that situation. Here is this person really looking like a loser, if ever there was one. And yet, God had not obviously abandoned him. Even the external situation was so difficult. God did not abandon him. God was with him. And God worked on that foundation, and based on his faithfulness to God's will, build a movement, a religious movement, which the world had never seen until now. And so that's a testimony, first of all, to the fact that externally things may not look great, but that is not always the measure of success. Ideally, it should be, ideally. But oftentimes, especially in the religious sphere, what is really the issue is, what is the core value? What is the core value which sustains people's belief or by which they live their lives? So when we look at Father's life, and when he was rejected in 1945 and then had to cross the border into North Korea, how hopeless must it have looked? In fact, he himself said, the world was a completely dark place. Spiritually, the world was totally dark and full of hopelessness. And the period from 1945 to 1952 was the period in which actually God wanted to expand and develop and truly establish the foundation for his kingdom. But instead, that became the period where the God-denying ideology of Marxism spread throughout the world. So it's like in a way when Jesus talked over Jerusalem that because they did not know the time of their visitation, he predicted the destruction of Jerusalem. Father, I heard, also prayed in a similar way over Pyongyang when he was leaving North Korea. He had tried very hard to reach out and to save and serve people, but the country then became one massive prison. And so what Father had to do was to start from zero and begin again. Luckily, he did not have to die on the cross. He was able to, in a sense, come down from that situation and begin anew, and therefore established HSA UWC, or Unification Church. And the purpose of his coming, or the purpose of Jesus' coming, was not to establish a religion. God did not create human beings for religions. Adam and Eve were not created to join a particular religion, but to live in the kingdom of God on earth, and then to transfer to the kingdom of God in the spiritual world. And so Jesus and Father were faced with a situation that they had to try to rebuild what was lost. Jesus, of course, through returning for 40 days. Father going through a 40-year period from 1945 to 1985, particularly. And so during this period, while the world of the God-denying ideology of Marxism was becoming stronger and stronger, it looked like it might take over the world, Father was quietly, painfully, patiently building his foundation, making the conditions to allow God to exercise his power. And so then, significantly in 1985, as you know, things began to change. It was that year that Gorbachev came to power in the Soviet Union. He began to talk about opening up and changing the situation there. And then from 1945 until 1992, this was the period of the rollback of that system. There was one country after the other began to forsake that ideology. So by 1992, then Father declared the beginning of the completed Testament era and the beginning of tribal messiahship. And actually, I was in Moscow in 1991, in December 25th, as it turns out, when the Soviet Union formally ended. In fact, I was on Red Square, watching the flag come down for the last time. And we used to, many years before, in our movement, even have skits and performances, talking about how one day we're going to be witnessing on Red Square. And at that time, it was possible. I'm not sure in today's Russia, unfortunately, whether it's possible to witness in such a place, but we could not believe that the changes that took place. And why did they take place? Is because God had the foundation to exercise His power based on the faith of True Father going through that 40-year period, using the Unification Church in the place of Christianity to make the necessary conditions to free the world. So this is the background to our church. So what was going on here was, you could say it was like a war. And in a war, there are many casualties. There's lots of destruction. There are lots of miscommunications. In fact, I'm just reminded of one story. It's kind of a humorous story of a miscommunication during the First World War. That's now 100 years ago this year it began, right? And at that time, of course, they didn't have internet, they didn't have, mobile phones or stuff. And so they were passing information by word of mouth from the front line to the headquarters. And there was a British guy leading the charge, but he was running low on ammunition. So he said, pass the word back to headquarters. We want reinforcements. We're going to advance. And the word got back, and this was the time when Britain had a slightly different currency, the old pound, shillings, and pence system. Anyway, by the time it got back to the headquarters, it was, we want 3 and 4 pence, we're going to advance. And so obviously they got the wrong message. So I think sometimes in our battles or in the times when we are, as a movement, had been going through a period of severe, serious tensions and activities, we didn't get it right. And many people could not stay with us or could not endure the challenging experiences. But what was being asked of us, of course, was that we could keep our faith, we could keep our conviction in the hope and in the belief that in the future we can turn our attention to developing ourselves in a more substantial way. So it was like in a way going through the time of the desert. Moses and his people, they were having a very tough time. In fact, it was so tough, as you know, that they were thinking life was much better in Egypt. At least we had a place to stay, we had food to eat, we had some sense of security. And they were looking back and ready to stone Moses for misleading them into the desert. And it took a lot of effort on behalf of Moses and those whom he worked with to finally, reach the banks of the River Jordan. And that's many times in our life, both our personal life of faith, but also as a movement, that is actually our situation. Especially those of us first generation who made a choice to forsake, in a way, the secular experience in life and move to a new lifestyle. Surely you were thinking sometimes, I was doing much better before I joined this movement. I had better income, I had a better life or whatever. And now here I find myself looking back and wondering, maybe that was better. So we go through that kind of challenge in our life of faith. And as a movement, we have been going through the period of the desert. In other words, we go through such experiences, both as an individual in our life of faith, but also as a movement as a whole. And there are times, surely, when a lot of people decide, well, I think I'll just go back. And maybe I'll join them later when they have settled down. And so in the end, as the Bible says, many are called, but few are chosen. So oftentimes people have not been able to make it through. And so sometimes it's a faithful few, and this is the history of all religions, I believe, that finally actually make their way to the goal, to the destination. And our movement in that way is no different. In fact, I suppose you watch the news or check out on the internet what's going on in the world. In today's world, it can be very, very discouraging when you listen to what's going on. You've probably been following the story of those girls in Nigeria that were kidnapped by this organization, Boko Haram. And then also this bombing in Syria. It seems like endless problems in the world. And in 1961, a father actually made the following statement. I'm not sure if it's possible to put it up on the screen, but I'll read it for you. This is in 12th of February 1961. Father said the following: human relationships will break down. You will face circumstances where you cannot trust anything. The more consciously you embrace God's will, the more pain and suffering you will feel as you observe the world. It will be a time when all hopes will be shaken, the core of your faith will waver, and the leaders whom you have followed will vacillate. Even if everything that you believed and trusted in is in turmoil, your heart should remain calm. You must know that God is never in turmoil and that He will visit you at this time. So when that song was sung this morning, Never Alone, or something like that, I was feeling that's really, in a way, our world is today. And people are really looking for hope. Who can we trust today? Last weekend I was up in Birmingham, and I was doing a one-day program on Saturday of last week with ambassadors for peace. There were about 80 of them there, and the focus was on values in education. How do we bring values into an education system, or how do we teach values, basically? Because I worked with brothers and sisters in Russia and China on this project, which developed character education materials and stuff for schools. We had also developed a series of presentations which introduced the concept or explained the concept. So David Earle had asked me, could you make a presentation or a few presentations to some of the leading ambassadors for peace? And actually, there was about 80 of them there, and among them was an official representative from the West Midlands Police. David had often been inviting them or some representative to attend programs, but finally they decided they would send somebody. And one lady, dressed fully in her uniform, police uniform, sat throughout the program and listened to all the presentations. And she didn't say too much during the program, and we spoke briefly over lunch, and she was expressing how she felt that the vision that we are sharing, the ideas that we are sharing, really are needed in today's world. She said nobody is talking clearly to in the way that you're presenting these ideas. They're not known in society. And later she wrote an email to David, and she said that I am so very grateful for the opportunity to have been there and to listen to the values that you are sharing, because we need those. We need those in our world today. And she promised, if the West Midlands Police can be of any help, please call us. And David was thinking right away, all those parking tickets that he needs to take care of. Anyway, so here's a person, we sometimes take it for granted. We have a values a system or a values concept which we are so used to, but we do not always understand how the world out there is thirsting for this. Now there are pockets, and I saw in the Albert Hall and other places like that, some pockets where people are grasping such ideas. But the vast world is still in the dark in terms of those things. And so I think that one of the things we have to do is how do we, as a movement, first of all as an individual, but also as a movement, come to the point where we can articulate our values and our ideals in a way that are really able to inspire the world. Now, there are different ways we can do that. We can water it down to almost nothing, where you basically speak well, but actually don't truly get to the point or the core of what you truly believe. One of the things that I was inspired by, in many ways, was the boldness with which the speakers at the Albert Hall testified to Jesus and their love for Jesus, unashamedly speaking it out, how much they love Jesus Christ and how much he has meant to them. And we had testimonies, for example, from former criminals, some of them quite serious, whose lives were changed by their experience. And so we, as individuals, as a movement, we need to come also to understand, again, what is the value of who we are based on true parents and based on the principle. What does it actually mean in my life? And how has my life changed? And how can I share and testify to that? And I read also recently from True Mother a statement. She talked about how she felt at the publication of the new Chansangyang. And she mentioned, said, I am immensely happy. Father's life achievements and gem-like words of truth for fallen humanity. I'm misreading that. Father's life achievements are gem-like words of truth for fallen humanity. I am truly grateful and overjoyed, thinking that the word in its intact form has become beautiful gems that are threaded together. I am so happy and grateful. So I feel that if we have such a spirit, if we can develop such a joy, conviction about principle, about true parents, and we can testify in such a way, that is the beginning point of how we will change this world. And I believe that is entirely possible. Now, one of the things that we are facing is how to, as a movement, structure ourselves where the Spirit of God can truly work and where we can get complete involvement of all members of our communities and our nations. And when I became national leader here 2 years ago, I didn't ask for the job, but I accepted the responsibility and tried to do the best, as imperfect as that has been. I faced a lot of criticism, and still do. And I feel that as I went through the last 2 years, I began to think, really, how are we going to really start moving? We're hearing about Vision 2020, but what does that really mean? And how do we actualize that idea? It's okay to have a vision, but what are the steps to get there? How do you begin to move in that direction? And True Mother doesn't give the details, although she's doing many things directly leading our movement to improve and change things. But we have to figure out also in each country what is it that we need to do in order to be able to create the foundation for a successful movement which can achieve what True Mother is expecting of us by 2020. And so in order to, and of course there was also the Channeling Constitution. I think all of you have received it in its current form. Whether you've read it or not, I'm not sure, but there was a symposium held some weeks or months ago where various members expressed their views on that, some quite critical and challenging, which has been sent back to Korea for their evaluation. And so a lot of people were struggling with that idea, like what does this Channeling Good Constitution actually mean? What are we supposed to establish? And that is a work in process. Actually, I would say that what you have been reading is not obviously the final document. It cannot be, because it's simply incomplete. I've been actually in touch with the wife of what until a few days ago, I believe, was the International Vice President, Mr. Huang. discussing also this issue and giving feedback based on, members' comments or concerns. And they are planning to publish a memo which will clarify some of the points, and also one of the main authors of the Constitution will visit the regions and be available to, first of all, explain why they wrote it the way they did, and also to answer questions about, the members may have, which are many right now. Anyway, that is one process that's taking place for the substantial establishment of the ideals that we believe in. Second point is, here in the UK, I felt the need for a group of members that we can sit together, talk together, discuss issues, make plans, and so on. And I set up an advisory board of first and second generation members at the end of last year, composed of 3 first and 3 second generation. There was Tim Reed, David Earle, and Cecile Fortune, Christabel Haynes, Matthew Jubb, and Matthew Hewish. And we've been meeting once a month and discussing issues. But in the process of our discussions, actually it became clear we need more than just an advisory board. We give advice, or for example, I may receive advice from them, but then decisions have to be made, they have to be carried through. And so we realized that simply an advisory board is not enough. You need a more structured form of leadership. And then over the last few weeks, a new development had been taking place. We're setting up a National Leadership Council, just to give it its broad term. And I'm very grateful for Tim Reed, who, as you know, many of you, was for 12 years, he was national leader here in the UK. Been through many experiences and is a very thoughtful person with a lot of experience. And so we've been working right now on establishing a structure which, if we put this in place successfully, I believe will allow a much better way to work in our movement. Because I think one of the big issues that challenged people was some of the problems around the time of Father's passing with True Family, members of True Family, and others. And the whole issue of can you trust leaders? Can you trust leadership? There are many, sometimes good, well-intentioned leaders who do wrong things. There are others who may be more malicious. And so the whole question of trust actually came up. And that's why I think for the past few years, our movement has been going through quite a bit of turmoil. How do we resolve these issues? And how do we build substantial foundations in each country? The goal is not to build big structures and organizations, actually. In the end, as you know, the highest goal, or the goal of all of us, is to become tribal messiahs. In other words, each of us in our own area reach out to the people immediately around us, whether it's your own family, relatives, friends, co-workers, and you share with them the vision based on principle. It's not about setting up an organization, although certain elements of that are, of course, needed to coordinate certain things. But the primary thing is about building the foundation based on tribal messiahship. In other words, true parents, they want to acknowledge us as messiahs, as true parents. And the way we can do that is through tribal messiahship work. And reaching out and giving spiritual life and blessing to people through principle. So that's our main goal, or should be our main concern as a movement. Not building big structures, but establishing ourselves as tribal messiahs. And so, but to support that and to be able to be in a position, on a national level to support and to help and to coordinate things, we are in the process right now of setting up this National Leadership Council. In the United States, they have set something up along those lines and seems to be working quite well. I've been in touch with Dr. Michael Balcom, as you know, as the leader of the movement there, to discuss with him also about how things are working and what are the positive and successful issues and what are also the challenges that he's facing. Today, I am not in a position to go into detail and explain the structure as we're debating it now, because originally we had this discussion among our advisory board then we've extended it out to the community. So basically, yesterday morning at 7 a.m., we had a 1.5-hour conference call with the pastors where Tim Reed could go into more detail and explain how this is developing and what we are proposing to do. And that will be taken further based also on the feedback from each of the community and other leaders in our movement. And then it will be again sent out for wider discussion. So it's a process taking place which will need a lot of time, a lot of thought, a lot of patience in some cases to be able to make it a success. And one of the things that we really are very concerned about is the inclusion of our younger generation. We are going to move off the scene. And the question, of course, which many of you are asking, I'm sure, is what will be left? What will we leave behind? Now, some people feel that we don't have much of a future. And that is sad if people feel that way, but on the other hand, we have to be realistic and recognize how do we prepare for the future. As Father himself even said one time, those who do not prepare for the future will perish. So we need to think about how do we prepare to hand on the foundation that we have inherited to the future. And of course, the big heartache, I would say, for first generation is that we could not grasp or we could not fully embody what true parents were expecting of us in our lives, and therefore put our younger generation at a distinct disadvantage. But it's not too late. And God is with us. God is working with us. And I really believe that with that spirit, we can change the situation. Actually, again, I'm reminded, of course, this is different, but think of how hopeless it must have felt at the foot of the cross. And yet God was able to work in an extraordinary way. And I really believe that as a movement and as an ideal, principle will carry on, will be realized. But there is this transition period we're in right now where we have to get through this. And it's in some ways like going through a storm. And how do we keep the boat steady as it goes through the storm? So in some ways, you've heard the movie, right? The Perfect Storm? Have you seen that film with George Clooney and some others, right? The time of Father Sungwa was almost like the perfect storm for our movement. We were not expecting that Father would go to the spirit world before Foundation Day, and other issues that came up at that time really challenged us as a movement and challenged all of our faith. But we've come through that, and we will continue. And I believe that as we move into the future, as we develop also, and I'm thinking particularly here in the UK, as we develop an environment where serious, responsible, caring, and concerned people, which you all are, get together, share ideas, respectfully listen to one another, and try to solve problems, then we're on a very sure footing. And that's where we're heading right now. So you'll be hearing more in the coming weeks and months about this idea. We're doing prayer as well to support this, and I ask for your prayer that we can be successful in this, that we really can make a good outcome. In the end, though, I have to say, it's not about organizational structures or administrative structures. That's not what guarantees success. It is the spirit and the faith and the heart of the people involved. And if we are united as a team, working together, and in a proper and harmonious way, I really believe we can transform our situation. This is my hope and my prayer. And I really want to ask for your understanding over the next weeks and months, because in a way this is a watershed for our movement. How do we move from the time in a way of war, as the Providence was sometimes, to the time when we can actually begin to settle our movement and settle our faith on the ground and build a movement, not a structure, but a movement of people moved by God's Spirit, moved by true parents, who can really change this world. True mother, as you saw, when father passed away, I was in Korea during that Seonghwa period. And it was hard to even imagine what she must have been going through with everything that was going on around her. First of all, being now left physically on her own without father being at her side. Dealing with family issues with the greater movement, and having to think about where do we go from here. And true mother, to her great, great credit, has stood up. And she has shown leadership which maybe we never expected from her. I always remember father speaking about the time when he was blessed with true mother. He talked about how actually he put her through quite a hard time, put her in many challenging situations. And he explained the reason for that was that I want true mother to be so strong spiritually that no matter what Satan throws at her, she will overcome it. She will deal with it. And I see that happening now, that at the age of just over 70, true mother has stood up, even in the face of all the sadness of losing father and the difficulties she was facing at that time, and is becoming more and more really a great leader in our movement. And I think that if we unite with her spirit, she is, as we say, the Holy Spirit in person. So if we unite with that spirit of true mother, we can have our Pentecost. Father is much more free now to visit because he's a spiritual being entirely, so he can travel anywhere at any time. And we can call upon true Father from the spirit world. We can receive the guidance and inspiration of true mother on the earth. If we take those things seriously, just like the disciples of Jesus, Jesus and the Holy Spirit work together to create the revival that they so badly needed. If we can set ourselves up, or we can then have our Pentecost and our renew. I hope that you can, each of you can think in this way as individuals, as families. How can we draw upon the Spirit of true Father and the Spirit and direction of true Mother? And responding to that, how can we fulfill our personal and family responsibility, our tribal messiahship responsibility, and overall our movement's tasks? Please join me in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, we are so grateful to you that we are born at this time. We can live at this time, the most special time in history when your son and your daughter completed the purpose of creation through blessing. So many people in the past, in the history of Christianity in particular, have longed for the day of the return of Christ, and yet could not see that day. We are the ones who are privileged to be born at this time. Yet it puts upon us also a serious responsibility about what we will do with what we know and how we will do it. We want to take this responsibility. We want to work together as a family to create your ideal on this earth, to build your heavenly kingdom. So many of us have been working on this path, or walking on this path for 40 years, 30 years or more. And when we look back, sometimes we feel, what have we really accomplished? I pray that we can look forward and that we can, on the foundation of all that has been done by our true parents and with many people's efforts, have a great sense of hope for the future, knowing that so many times in your providence, your greatest victories came after the most painful difficulties, just like the brightest morning comes after the darkest night. And I really pray that you can guide us. There are many who may be struggling in their faith, in their family, in other circumstances. I pray that you can give each one strength and hope and love. And bless all of our efforts as we go forward. We are truly grateful now to gather here in Lancaster Gate, in the place where true parents have stood, have blessed members, have spoken so many times. And we want to truly feel your Spirit with us. Thank you for this day. Please be with each one here and bless them throughout this coming week. I report in all of our names and in my name, Jack Corle, the Corle Blood Center family. Adieu.
To pray for one another. So if you want to find someone to pray with, you can go through some of the things that you're going through in your life and you feel that you need prayer for, some support for. So the band will accompany us musically.